I mean, the Palestinians face the same exact question on a regular basis because Israel does very similar things to the Palestinians and has since 1948. The reality is that Israel is the attacker and the aggressor in this scenario. And so this idea that somehow they're a Western democracy is, yeah, I guess in the same way that the United States genocided the Native Americans.
No, I don't know. This is getting ridiculous, Piers. I mean, you have to be rational. I mean, what does that have to genocide of the Native Americans?
Donald Trump promised his base he would end endless Middle Eastern wars. Yet here we are watching his administration launch illegal strikes on civilian infrastructure, wreck 80-year-old alliances in the Gulf, and back themselves right into the exact same corner they started in. Meanwhile, foreign policy hawks like Victor Davis Hanson step onto interview shows to parade domestic civil liberties as a moral shield for ongoing land theft, open-air concentration camps, and civilian slaughter. But when an actual expert steps up to the mic, the entire neocon narrative collapses under the weight of real-world receipts. If you believe in actual accountability over imperial propaganda, hit that subscribe button right now. I'm Neil. This is The Honest Perspective. Imperial arrogance always collapses when forced to face reality. Let's get into it.
Say called the global ripples of the Iran war, and we'll come to more of that a little later with Victor, but he concludes for all the global abuse and cheap left-wing attacks, America is emerging from the war perhaps stronger than at any point since the post-war era. What is your response to that?
Yeah, I see it very differently. Like if, let's say he gets a deal on Iran's nuclear weapons program, then we'll be back to where we were before he tore up the JCPOA in his first term. So that's not a win, right? Because you're just putting the clock back to 2018. If he gets the Strait open, we're just back to where we were before he started bombing. So that's not a win, right? He's created a problem and then he solves it. So that's not a win. He's wrecked the United States' relationships with the Gulf states. Saudi Arabia has actually said that the United States' interests and Saudi Arabia's interests are no longer aligned, which is a catastrophe for the United States. We've had a stable alliance with them since 1945. He's wrecked the economy of the Gulf states. So, we're now starting to see serious pushback from states in the Gulf. Some are hinting of switching oil sales to the yuan from the dollar. And then, of course, the United States' credibility is ruined because he conducted a series of war crimes. We bombed Iranian infrastructure. We attacked their civilian targets. So we're actually in war crime land. And we completely failed to do the only thing that was reasonable in this war, because the only reason to do this war was to take out the Islamic Republic, which would have been amazing. Like in the first few days, I was hopeful. I didn't think it would happen because I didn't have any confidence in the Trump administration, but I was really hopeful that he would somehow pull this off. And of course, he failed. What he did was, in two foolish steps, he took the possibility of an Iranian uprising off the table. The first one was in January when he told the protesters to go into the streets. The United States had their back. They went into the streets. The government began slaughtering the protesters by the thousands. We don't know if it was 3,000 or 13,000 or 23,000, but it was a big number. And the United States did absolutely nothing. And then on February 28, we began this bombing campaign. Well, in the beginning, there were Iranians who were cheering and saying, yeah, this is amazing. Let's bring down the regime. But as the bombing campaign continued and it began to target Iranian infrastructure and they began to see their relatives dying, that Iranian support for the war quickly evaporated and it reversed and it became Iranian support for the regime. And this shouldn't have been a surprise to anybody because that happens in every single war. In Nazi Germany, 1/3 of the population actively resisted the Nazis. 1/3, until we started bombing Germany in 1943. When we did, that resistance evaporated because in that moment, the German people started going, wait a minute, genocide's on the table and we're the receivers of this. Maybe we have to back the regime. And so the fact that the US government didn't know that was what was going to happen with the Iranian people it just shows how clueless they are about how the world works and how the Middle East works.
Dr. Casagranda just stated the absolute core reality of hawkish foreign policy. You cannot tear up a functioning agreement like the 2018 JCPOA, spend years escalating, bomb dual-use infrastructure, and then claim a negotiated deal back at the baseline is a win. The receipts show that U.S. unilateral withdrawal didn't eliminate enrichment. It accelerated it while blinding international oversight. When you target civilian infrastructure, you don't inspire domestic revolts. You push the population right into the arms of the regime you're trying to take out.
And so at the end of the day,
they provide it because unlike the country you're speaking from, they're the only consensual society that have regular, open, transparent elections and free speech
they're an
and full rights for
apartheid
women.
state.
No,
where
they're
Arabs
not.
are subhuman that they murder on a regular basis. How many Gazans have they just slaughtered? And they're taking land away from
I can tell you
Arabs in
right
the West
now.
Bank by the minute as we're speaking.
Are you going to sit here and tell me that? Are you going to tell me right now that a person says, if a person says in Israel, I don't want to be an observant Jew, I want to be a Muslim and I want to have a mosque and I want to be a Christian and have a church. Can you go to the UAE or any of the Gulf states and say, I don't want to be a Muslim, I want to be a Christian, or I want to be a Jew and I want to open a church or a synagogue? No, you can't do that.
What does that have to do with genocide?
It has to do with why
fighting the inability to convert from Islam to another religion with it's okay to slaughter Arabs and who, by the way, a percentage of them are Christian.
I'm not going to argue that Israel is the only transparent. It's the only transparent consensual. I'm not going to get in an argument because anybody who's empirical knows that Israel is transparent. It has scheduled elections. It has free speech. It has full rights for women. And you have
it doesn't have free speech.
The point I was going to ask you, Victor, is out of interest, because I've had this debate quite a lot recently. Why is it that Israel is not compelled to be transparent about its nuclear capacity in terms of having nuclear weapons?
It is. It has 170 nuclear weapons.
It's never admitted any.
It doesn't. It maybe never officially, but everybody knows it's allowed people. It discusses that all the time. It has 175 nuclear weapons.
But why is it never admitted any of that?
Why is it never admitted? Because I think most countries don't admit how many they have. We don't admit exactly how many ready nuclear weapons we have. When I say there's 6,500 Russian nuclear weapons, that's because of intelligence estimates. But the Israelis have never denied it. If you say somebody to even the Netanyahu government, you have 175 nuclear weapons, he'll say no comment. And I think Donald Trump would say no comment. But we know how many we have. It's the official position of all these countries not to talk about how many nuclear weapons.
Yeah, but I think my point is Israel don't admit to having any. They don't admit to having any nuclear weapons at all. And I'm not sure why they are allowed to have the only pass on that kind of transparency about whether a country has nuclear weapons. We know 9 countries do. That list doesn't include Israel. And I'm just bemused as to why.
Do what?
Well, officially 9 countries in the world have nuclear weapons. That list does not include officially Israel. And I've never understood why, if they have 170, as you say, why are they not part of that list? Why are they not country number 10 and transparent about it? You say how transparent they are. Why are they not transparent about their nuclear capacity?
Notice the immediate double standard on display. Victor Davis Hanson tries to hide behind the phrase Western democracy to sanitize state violence. But the moment Piers Morgan asks why Israel gets a free pass on hiding its uninspected nuclear warheads outside the Non-Proliferation Treaty, Hanson falls back on a no-comment stance. Transparency for everyone else, total immunity for U.S. allies. Let's look at how Casagranda dismantles the root causes of regional hostility in this final clip.
Why? Because it is a Western democracy, it's a free society. What do you mean?
That's nonsensical. Look,
it is.
It's nonsensical that anybody would hate Israel just because it had democratic elections. The problem with Israel is it stole the land from the Palestinians. It left them in a state of permanent refugee status. It does nothing to fix it. And in fact, it's made the situation worse by basically turning Gaza into a giant open-air concentration camp and then tearing the West Bank up into little pieces and walling off the Palestinians.
Let me ask you, if on October 7th, if terrorists had come into your country and slaughtered, raped, beheaded, tortured 1,200 people, And then they had taken 240 hostages back. And then they had subverted UN and American and other European relief and built a $1 billion subterranean complex whose exits and entries were in schools, mosques, and hospitals, and hid as human shields. And then they said, when Israel said, we would like you to extradite the people who were responsible for this, they said no. And when you had pictures of people cheering in the streets and trying to hit the hostages, and we know now that the hostages were tortured, what would you do in response to that?
I mean, the Palestinians face the same exact question on a regular basis because Israel does very similar things to the Palestinians and has since 1948. The reality is that Israel is the attacker and the aggressor in this scenario. And so this idea that somehow they're a Western democracy is, yeah, I guess in the same way that the United States genocided the Native Americans.
No, I don't know. This is getting ridiculous, Piers. I mean, you have to be rational. I mean, what does that have to genocide of the Native Americans? I mean, we're talking about the Middle East in rational terms, but when you bring in all of these other things, you just weaken your case. Israel, I was on the Stanford campus. Every day I walked across the campus, I saw very affluent Middle Easterners for the first time in their lives, many from where you are now, protesting, screaming, yelling at the government. If they did that in any of these Gulf states, they'd be arrested. And you know that.
It's true. There's no protest in the UAE. I'm not going to tell you otherwise.
You said right now, if you want to say right now, if you said right now, I've had a change of heart about October 7th. I just want to throw it out there. I think it was a horrible act, and I can see why Israel retaliated. If you just said, I have a change of attitude and I reassess my position, I can see why Israel did it. It's kind of an ambiguous question. There's arguments, and you would probably lose your position. You know,
I don't think so. No,
I think you would. Try it.
For the record, I think that what the Palestinians did on October 7 was a horrible act. It was murder. It was slaughter. Who's going to condone that? But what Israel did in response was orders of magnitude worse.
What we just witnessed across those segments is the absolute systematic collapse of the standard neocon talking points when confronted with historical facts. Notice the exact playbook Victor Davis Hanson tries to run throughout that entire debate. Whenever the discussion turns to state-sanctioned violence, civilian casualties, or illegal bombing campaigns against dual-use infrastructure, the immediate defense is to fall back on domestic civil liberties. They have free speech, they have elections, they are a Western democracy. As Dr. Casagranda rightly pointed out, having democratic institutions at home does not give any state a blank check to conduct military aggression, enforce an illegal occupation, or commit war crimes abroad. The historical comparison he raised, how the United States routinely invoked the banner of Western civilization to justify the systematic displacement and genocide of Native Americans, cut straight to the structural core of American empire. Domestic democracy has long been weaponized as a moral cosmetic, a rhetorical shield used to whitewash imperial expansion, resource extraction, and the destruction of foreign sovereign states. Look at the blatant double standard surrounding transparency and international law. Hanson insists Israel is a beacon of transparency, yet when Piers Morgan asks a direct, elementary question, why isn't Israel transparent about its estimated 170 to 175 nuclear warheads? Hanson simply dodges and says, no comment. Think about what that reveals. Israel remains the only non-signatory to the Non-Proliferation Treaty in the region with an uninspected, unacknowledged nuclear arsenal. When Iran enriches uranium, it triggers global panics, draconian economic sanctions, and preemptive strike campaigns. When an American ally builds an entire underground nuclear arsenal outside of IAEA safeguards, the entire Washington foreign policy establishment agrees to call it a no-comment standard. That isn't rules-based international order. That is imperial privilege. Furthermore, Casagranda completely dismantles the lazy, Orientalist trope that regional hostility toward Israel stems from some deep-seated hatred of democracy. Hostility in the Middle East toward Israel does not stem from its electoral process. It stems from concrete, ongoing material oppression. Decades of land theft, the systematic fragmenting of the West Bank, and turning Gaza into a blockaded open-air concentration camp long before the current escalation began. And pay close attention to how Dr. Casagranda handled the trap on October 7th. He did what every honest, principled progressive commentator must do. He condemned the atrocity and the murder of civilians without a single second of hesitation. But he refused to allow that condemnation to be weaponized as a retroactive justification for carpet bombing, mass starvation, and orders of magnitude worse civilian destruction. A brutal crime committed by a non-state actor does not grant a state actor the legal or moral right to unleash collective punishment against an entire captive population. This entire transcript exposes the fundamental lie of MAGA foreign policy. Donald Trump campaigned on an anti-establishment, America First platform, promising his base he would put an end to endless Middle Eastern interventions and regime change misadventures. Yet the moment he takes power, his administration operates on the exact same failed neocon playbook. Aggressive unilateral bombing, disregard for international law, destroying functional diplomatic agreements like the JCPOA, and handing total military immunity to authoritarian regional partners. The result? We aren't safer. The region isn't stabilized, and American voters are left footing a multi-billion-dollar bill for war profiteers while working-class families pay double at the gas pump. Imperial arrogance is not a substitute for foreign policy strategy, and war crimes do not become acceptable simply because they are wrapped in the flag of a Western democracy. If you believe in truth over imperial access and putting human lives over state power and corporate profits, subscribe to The Honest Perspective. I'm Neil. Empire isn't a substitute for justice. And war crimes are still war crimes, no matter who commits them. That's the honest perspective, and that's where I'll leave you.